We can talk about young entrepreneurship. We can talk about, I don't know, man.
Could go anywhere, man. That's the beauty of this.
We can talk about food.
Do you want to talk about food?
Yeah.
We might talk about food.
Yeah.
Hi there, welcome to Directors Debrief, episode 11. Episode 11. One day I'll get good at actually counting and figuring out what episode we're on. Thank you for joining us. How are we doing today?
Not as good as you, wee man. How are you doing?
Not as good as you, wee man.
Yeah.
So we were actually, just before we went live, talking about the multitude of things we could talk about.
Yeah.
We could talk about cancel culture. We could talk about...
There's a lot going on at the moment, man.
There is, yeah.
In the world.
Do we want to touch on that?
Yeah, we can touch on a few things. So I guess the cancel culture topic came up because of the recent Joe Rogan.
Yeah.
I don't know what you call it. Scandal.
Scandal.
Yeah.
Let's go big.
Let's go scandal. Don't know who the scandal is with, but it's all going on. So for context, for those that don't know, or if this is...
I need the context, to be honest, yeah.
If this is dated by the time someone listens to it, Joe Rogan essentially runs a podcast exclusively on, I was about to say Spotify, which is a streaming platform. So
it's exclusive to...
Yes.
Okay,
so he signed a deal with Spotify about a year or two back.
Okay.
Could be a bit longer than that, but it was like $100 million dollar deal. And he signed it with them so that all his podcasts are on there. So he took himself off YouTube, Apple Music, Google Podcasts, anywhere like that. It was a huge move because everyone's like, are you not kind of closing off your audience? But he had two thoughts at the time, apparently. I've not come across a podcast where he's spoken about it directly because I'm not an avid listener of his, but I do like the occasional episode. So he's really good. So obviously his historical background, as you knew him as well, is he's a comedian.
Yes.
But he started this Joe Rogan Experience podcast, and he interviews a variety of guests from all backgrounds, all opinions as well. They're not necessarily just who he agrees with.
Yeah.
Quite the opposite in some cases. And he invites them on, and he gets to openly speak about any topics. So he's spoken about everything, pretty much under the sun. He's had Elon Musk on many times, Yeah.
And I think people know it from some of the... he doesn't hold back. There's some things that are very easy to associate with Joe Rogan. He doesn't hold back. It always has a bit of a wild card factor to it, like the Elon Musk thing. He smoked a joint with him or something like that. Which, by the way, just very quickly, Elon Musk's reaction to that is one of my favorite things, where everyone's just like, so you're a stone. He's like, anybody who watched that podcast can tell you I did not look like I knew what I was doing. And it's
He's
very easy to agree with. He had no idea what he was doing. But yeah, sorry, the Joe Rogan experience.
No, so absolutely. So you said it perfectly, that he brings guests on and they speak openly. They speak fresh. Not that Joe Rogan necessarily agrees or disagrees with them, but he asks great questions, in my opinion. And that's what's made him one of the most listened to podcasters out there, because people just enjoy hearing fresh, honest opinions and perspectives as well, which is good in a world where we're often, some may argue, conditioned to think in one way or another. And it seems like that's becoming more and more the case. So just a bit of context on the Spotify thing. I think one of the reasons Joe Rogan, other than the monetary aspect of it, that he went exclusively to Spotify is because we'd started to see centralized platforms such as YouTube, Apple Music, cracking down and censoring certain content that people were uploading. Not Joe Rogan's necessarily at the time, but other content. So we've all, I think yourself included, you've been there where YouTube have had the power to kind of suppress something you've posted there, because it may not kind of go hand in hand with what their kind of rules and regulations
guidelines.
Right. Yeah. It happens to be a bot that's taken it down, but the idea there is that they have the power to do that.
Yeah.
And it's almost as if, yes, someone can say, oh yeah, but it's their platform, they can do what they want. But in a world where they monopolize pretty much content in that format, arguable again, but some may say video content they monopolize, that's almost like them shutting your mouth in public. So you can't speak openly. And some may say that's great for hate speech and stuff like that.
Yeah, because
But where do you draw the line?
Where do you draw the line? Because the one thing I want to pick out what you said was in public. This isn't necessarily public. This is at somebody's house.
Yeah.
This is at Mrs. YouTube's house.
Sure.
That these words are being spoken and they're being kicked out for saying these words. And so Honestly, myself, I'm in two minds about something like that. Not about the Joe Rogan incidents. I have an opinion on the first one and a very different opinion on the second incident.
Sure.
But I do genuinely believe that, Spotify, whoever it is, if it's your platform, you have the right to do with it as you wish. But yeah, again, on the other side of things, where do you draw the line? Because ultimately, if everybody is there, at what point does it become a public domain? At what point is it, if it's something everybody has access to and everybody is at that particular place?
Sure.
Where do you draw the line?
Yeah. And this comes to it that we're living in a world where, look, YouTube are doing the right thing in their eyes.
Yeah.
And the right thing in many people's eyes. Because they have that power and authority to it, of course, they want to stop content and misinformation where it can escalate and cause a detriment to society.
Yeah.
The issue we have here is that in today's world where you have centralized platforms, they have no choice but to do that. Whereas in the future, and I hope the world is going towards that way, where we've spoken about decentralization of these things, there shouldn't be a YouTube man in charge to decide whether something is said or not said.
Okay.
It should be a community choice as to what is allowed and what is not, and what is acceptable and what's not. But again, I'm in two minds just like you.
Yeah.
So I have no concrete thing. So anyway, I'm blabbering on, but the kind of idea here is that Joe Rogan's been through all of this, and a number of his episodes have recently been taken down on Spotify. That's been due to another issue, not the original issue where it was due to potential misinformation of coronavirus, where he had two doctors on in the first incident, and they were potentially spreading misinformation against science and what coronavirus was actually doing. So that's a theory in itself. From what I've listened to in the short two episodes, yes, there are things I disagree with in the episodes, in my opinion. However, I think a lot of the wokeness and the cancelling of those episodes are from people that actually haven't listened to it, and they've kind of cherry-picked certain things that were said and decided that the entire content was not acceptable and will cause other people to not take coronavirus so seriously or spread information about vaccines.
So this is coming from somebody who hasn't listened. I haven't listened to that particular episode. I actually have listened to a fair few of the Joe Rogan episode experiences, full length. Some of them like 4 hours. It is just a conversation with him. He doesn't care. He's not trying to meet a quota or hit a time limit. From your experience of watching it, would you say they are spreading misinformation or giving their opinion or their... The problem is they're doctors, right?
Yeah.
So some element of their opinion is going to hold a fair bit of weight given their qualifications.
Yeah.
But do you feel, having listened to that, it swayed you in any way? It's changed your opinion of coronavirus in any particular way?
Yeah. So it's a great point, and I think that's one of the biggest arguments from those that are trying to cancel those podcasts by saying no, it's not just because they're average people; it's because they come from authority, and that authority backs them, which means people are listening to that misinformation from that. Now, again, I don't want to give my opinion in this because I am in two minds and it would come off as unclear, but it's interesting to kind of think holistically, and that's hopefully what we can do, of what are the pros and what are the cons of this. And I think what I did come back out from the episode, it's not like I came out with new information that I hadn't heard before. But it opens your eyes to start thinking a bit more critically about things. Again, there was a lot on the episode I disagreed with, but being exposed to that at least opens your eyes and opens your thoughts, which you can then go and actually investigate against the science. And probably, you know, there's a difference between just taking what someone says and then chanting that around, saying, yes, this is what I now believe in, or actually taking that, critically thinking about it, seeing if you agree or disagree with it. If you're unsure, going to research a little bit more. And I take that with not just this episode, but other things, other podcasters as well. It's about critical thought.
We were talking about critical thinking not too long ago, and sort of how important it is for society. But okay, moving on from that, well, no, actually, I don't want to move on from that just yet. I've been doing a lot of thinking. A lot of shower thoughts, a lot of wandering around my flat thoughts, and I've been doing a lot of thinking about cancel culture as a whole.
Okay.
And I genuinely think that again, to play devil's advocate, and I'm sorry for the term devil here, but the people who did want to cancel Joe Rogan, or the people who want to cancel somebody like Dave Chappelle for his latest special that has a heavy focus on transphobia, the transgender community.
Do you know? Sorry, just for context, what did he say in those episodes, or something along the lines?
Joe Rogan, or
no,
Dave Chappelle.
Yeah, Dave Chappelle.
Dave Chappelle on his latest special. I'm very hesitant to give my opinion on this.
No, no opinion, just more what was said.
Yeah, so it goes through his. He talks a lot about the transgender community. He has made some comments or some jokes in the past that, when I look at it through my non-transgender eyes, I can see how, if I was transgender, how I might feel like it was something he was saying negative about me, people like me, and how that it might be offensive. Whether it's offensive and whether somebody's offended by it, I think, are two very separate things.
Understood.
Yeah, I think that it's hard to put into words. For example, I'm from the Middle East. I've seen a lot of comedians take some sharp jabs at the Middle East.
Yeah.
And some do it in a manner that makes me laugh, and some do it in a manner where I'm like, it's just like unnecessary. I think, and I'm not sure, but I think the difference is the intent. Okay, I think if the intent is to go, I'm here and the people I'm talking about are here.
Yeah.
I struggle to laugh at that, because I think that I don't think you have good intentions. Purely the intentions are to bring somebody down, anybody of any race, religion, or whatever.
Sure. But
the comedians that get it right, that still make me laugh, have the intentions of offering a unique or funny perspective on a topic with the intention of making somebody laugh. If it's not unique, if it's not fresh, if it's not interesting, an interesting perspective or thing, that's where it becomes offensive.
Yeah.
But to bring it back to Dave Chappelle, I think that his latest special was again about a transgender comedian that he happened to really enjoy working with, and he invites her on to open for him. I think she was like relatively new, and just about his experiences, and some of the things he says does reflect or does make it seem like he. I can see how some of it might be offensive. Is the easiest way to put it. But the thing is, what that opened... I watched the whole special. I'm a huge Dave Chappelle fan. That hasn't changed since watching the special. But what I actually think Dave Chappelle really smartly highlights is the detriment that cancel culture brings.
Okay.
In that he talks about finally understanding this transgender person's perspective. Because I think he says he was with her and he made a comment and she flipped out at him. And she goes, I just need you to understand it coming from a human being. And he goes, that is something you and I can relate to. Like somebody who, Dave Chappelle's black. He grew up, I don't think he grew up particularly affluent or anything like that.
Yeah.
But he said in that moment, that's when I 100% related to her. That's when I understood that, and whoever in this world might come with their disadvantages. So, and that might affect their life in some way or another. But the argument that I saw most of all on the special, or people talking about the special, was you can't say that. That needs to be taken down. You need to remove this. When in actual, if I'm perfectly honest, watching that special, I didn't really see that. I saw him as, maybe it wasn't the right place for him to do that, but I thought I saw him more trying to steer the conversation around the transgender community. And I think people took offense to that. I think people said, you have no right to tell us how to move this. And again, I'd have to argue that's a valid point.
Sure.
But to just say...
So that's almost, who is he to even comment on this area?
Yeah, if I was to give it my best guess, that's what I think it was. But that's what really highlighted to me about how cancel culture might actually be to the detriment of the people who want to cancel individuals.
Sure.
Where instead of saying, oh, well, that's your perspective, let's try and talk this out, let's try and figure it out, or actually, you know what, Mr. Chappelle, the things that you said actually make some sense, or this made sense and this didn't, to just say that he needs to be cancelled.
Yeah.
I don't know, I think that comes it puts a full stop to the conversation.
Yeah.
And I think it makes other people nervous to have that conversation.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's making those... Yeah, I completely agree. And it's making those people that want honest discussion perhaps move towards a bit more of an extreme view. Or certainly in society's eyes, when that's not probably where they even stood or even have any opinions on. So, it's it's causing some bubbles and causing some walls where there may not necessarily need to be on that side. But the issue we've got here again is cancel culture is growing so strong, and again, people are being concerned about what they're saying, the way they're commenting and stuff, that we are losing that ability to express ourselves honestly. Again, there is a line.
Yeah.
And that's unfortunately, I'm kind of being hypocritical as I'm talking, but there is a line between hatred and actual hate speech, and just giving your honest, valid opinion, or questioning your own thoughts, saying, why do we think in this way? You know, perhaps we need to discuss and engage in a certain topic. So that's where this whole, going on the Joe Rogan thing recently, and there are a few more podcasters out there that are going through quite similar things on a smaller scale. They're in this in between stage because they have an audience and a following who are so happy to listen to this and critically think. Again, they may not agree with everything that Joe Rogan puts out, but they're happy to hear these opinions. Just like myself, I disagree with a lot of things that I hear on his podcast, but again, it expresses some opportunity to think critically.
Exactly that. What do you make of if somebody does something that you think is worthy of not worthy of cancellation, but you're like, I really, really disagree with that, and I think that collectively as a society we can all agree that was some fucked up shit.
Yeah.
Like I would argue the second instance of the Joe Rogan scandal, the second part of the scandal where he used racial slurs, and there was a montage of them, and there was a lot of them. And I think it was like a 3-minute montage. And the first minute and a half of this montage, and I'm in no position to say the acceptability of that particular word being used, but it wasn't being used as an attack. Again, this is not my opinion. I'm not saying that it's okay to say that word if it's not in an attacking manner. I'm just saying that it didn't look like an attack.
Putting context behind it.
Exactly. It sounded like a descriptor. So he wasn't calling somebody the N-word. He was saying more like, oh, that person said the N-word. Yeah. And again, you can argue both sides of that coin, and I'm not going to get into that. But then he said something that was pretty much hard to defend. Like, not hard, impossible to defend. Yeah. He used some... he described... Have you seen this?
No, I haven't.
He describes going to a cinema in a black neighborhood where he says he was going to watch Planet of the Apes. And he said, I walked into the cinema and it felt like I'd walked into Planet of the Apes. Very jarring, very shocking, very, like, again, kind of almost chilling to hear something like that in this day and age.
And when was that said?
So that was said many, many years ago.
Okay.
Again, it wasn't like said in a time where it was like acceptable or anything. But that clip was also slightly taken out of context. Doesn't justify what he said.
So let's hear the context. Yeah.
The context is he says that, and then he goes. I was speaking to Harvey about this. It sounds like he says that as if he's trying to make a funny comment, realizes he didn't make a funny comment, and then shortly goes, "Oh, that was pretty fucked up." And so what that got me thinking, and his apology. When I've been discussing his apology with people, most people would argue that it's probably one of the most sincere apologies.
Is that the recent videos he's posted on Instagram?
And he says something along the words of, I don't think I'm racist. However, if anybody's ever calling you a racist, you should probably recognize within yourself that you've messed up somewhere. Yeah. And so I've had a look back at myself, and I'm not going to try and justify what I said. I fucked up and I'm sorry. Yeah. And that's what I'm curious about you and your mental headspace. If somebody does something like that, but they do offer probably like what seems to be a very sincere apology, is that something that you can justify Spotify going, all right, we're going to relist this stuff. Okay, I'm okay to listen to Joe Rogan again.
Yeah, it's again a difficult one to offer my opinion on. So I just want to be clear, I'm by no means apologizing on behalf of what Joe Rogan said, or kind of expressing that I think it was okay, because that is not my place to say. Yeah. For a fact, if I were to give my opinion, I don't think it's okay to say those words. But the biggest thing that came out of that when I was reading a lot about this and what was going on is, up until that point that montage was released, very rarely did people call Joe Rogan a racist. Sure. There were people that did that, or certainly right-wing, or heavily right-wing, but very, very little actually went, he is a racist, or he is contributing to kind of the racist culture and hatred or hate speech. Yeah. After that release of that montage, suddenly everything going, someone went back and stitched together all of those together. Yeah. at the end of the day, no one actually made up that he said it. He did say those words.
Yep.
But someone on purpose, someone who's out to kind of add fuel to the fire, went out their way to do that. And I think the issue that we have with woke culture, if we're just circling back to the whole thing, is everyone loves joining in on the mob. You know, they quickly just go straight onto it without, again, going back to the critically thinking about what's going on. As you said, you thought about it, you read about what was going on, and you said, okay, but no one, they were taken out of context. They weren't acceptable words to say, but people need to look at the bigger picture. Unfortunately, when cancel culture gets going and the mob get going, it's too late.
Very hard to stop.
Yeah.
Just bear with me 2 seconds. Arrivederci. See ya.
Good weekend.
Yeah, it's still connected just fine. So yeah.
Yeah. Anyway, like I said, we're veering on lines that we haven't probably given our full thoughts to. But it's a really interesting space, and I think if we're really circling it back to something we keep talking about is this ability to critically think.
Yes.
Not to offer your opinion on what's being said, Joe Rogan or otherwise other podcasters. That is a debate that we have to have internally with ourselves, but also look at the full facts. The issue is when stuff gets going, people start talking about certain topics away from just woke culture, but people talk about billionaires and how they're not paying taxes. Again, they see the headlines, they don't look, they see the clickbait headlines, and then they jump on it. And then they've got a whole trending topic on Twitter of people just jumping on. Again, Molly May, a huge example. I was all over Twitter on that. I won't deny it. Some of the stuff was quite funny. If you just looked at the memes, not putting her into the context of it, but just generally, it was funny. We were all laughing on it. But then I saw people really going to town with it, really putting some hate out there. And at the end of the day, they took a clip of what she said, something about everyone's got the same 24 hours in the day.
Yeah, that's the thing. I heard them. I've listened to that whole podcast, by the way, from start to finish.
Yeah,
and that's the one thing I kept hearing. And I'll be honest, in hindsight, I don't even remember her saying that on the podcast.
Yeah.
She says so many things. A bunch of stuff I disagree with, by the way.
Yeah.
But I didn't even remember that she said that.
Yeah, right. So again, but when that clip is taken into it, people think they've listened to everything she's got to say. And they said, right, we've taken it, and she thinks she's above everyone else, and she's some elite person that can outdo everyone else and be rich and famous. So that's an example. And again, I don't know if you classify that as woke culture. I'm not sure what is woke culture, what's not. But people jumping on the bandwagon and getting in there, is it because people are angry? Is it social media where everyone just wants to feel a part of something and no one wants to say something the other way in concern that they'll be called out for supporting the wrong side? Where does that stand? I
don't know, like in terms of critical thinking, because I do think that seems to be the core of our conversation today. Critical thinking. It does. I'm really trying to put a positive spin on this, because the thing that I wanted to get out of this conversation is not that if somebody says something racist, if somebody says something that we can collectively as a society agree is going to hurt somebody, then I think that there should be something done. But the cancellation just seems like a full stop. Yeah. And the reason why I think the mentality around cancel culture might be to the detriment of certain conversations is because it is just a full stop. It is this person should be cancelled. It isn't let's open up a dialogue. Why is Joe Rogan saying something like that? Why are people still using that term to this day? How can we encourage, how do we express the importance and the weight? Because half the people don't necessarily know the history behind the N-word.
Absolutely.
They don't know the weight that it carries, and they don't understand why it's socially acceptable for one group of people to say it and another group to not say it. Yeah. And this is why I always love to bring this up, but I'm a huge fan of the UK artist Akala. Because if you ever hear him discussing anything, there is zero anger behind his voice. Somebody asked him on Question Time, why is it socially acceptable for black people to use the N-word and for white people not to? And there is zero anger in his voice. There is just pure logic, rationale, and it is so eloquently put. And he explains, he doesn't say, the way he expresses it is, look into the history of that word. Yep. Look into the history and the meaning. Why do white people even want to use it? And again, it's just that having that discussion rather than, no, you shouldn't use it, or again, pointed at Joe Rogan, being offended on behalf of somebody. Because I'm willing to bet a lot of people wanting to cancel it I don't think all of those people are offended by that particular term.
Sure.
But again, it's also something Daniel Sloss talks about, is like being offended on behalf of somebody else. And all of this encapsulates around like, okay, but what are we doing to fix this issue?
Yeah.
Apart from just joining a mob and throwing hate around.
I think you're spot on, and something you said there of the fact that genuinely, and this is not defending those that are using the word in the wrong way, but it's adding some empathy to the subject, that they don't know why they're saying it, or they don't know the history or context behind it. I'll be honest, I don't know the entire history. You know, I've studied this, I've gone through it, but at the end of the day, we don't know it. And that you can blame on society, you can blame on our education system, the fact that we're not educated to think for ourselves in that way, that, okay, let's go back into time and understand where these words come from. Are we, does cancel culture almost shield us away from that education?
Yeah, in a sense, I guess.
Yeah.
It doesn't shield. It gives us an excuse for not having that education, because nobody asks, why are you part of that mob?
Yeah.
You know what I mean? If you go into that like an interview style of like, so why are you offended by this today? The chances are that a person who's not necessarily offended by that term might go, oh, because this person's offended, or because society agrees that we should be offended by that.
And it's the easy thing to do, not to put the work in to find out.
Yeah, exactly.
What's going on.
You know, the first part of the during the pandemic, not that this is not the start of this movement. At the start of the pandemic, there was a strong drive for the Black Lives Matter movement, and there was the thing I saw most commonly amongst my friends group was the theme of education, and I really, really liked that. There was loads of people sharing. Great documentaries for people who like to consume documentaries, great books for people who like to educate themselves on books through the medium of books, about Black history, about why and how there are current issues of society that might oppress Black people, and how if we all educate ourselves, we can come up with solutions. Like one of the things that this blew my mind, because this opened my eyes, was somebody in America was driving around and filming neighborhoods where predominantly white people lived and predominantly Black people lived. And it was a very smart comparison of the supermarkets that were around.
Sure.
And around the Black neighborhood, it was predominantly fast food chains, cheap, low quality food sellers. And in the white neighborhood, it was all like Whole Foods and like organic and high nutrient food.
Right.
Very few restaurant chains and fast food.
Okay.
And it was this, I don't know, it was a very clever take on systemic racism of like, is the oppression on subtle levels there? Is it present? And this person wasn't offering their opinion of it. They weren't saying like, this is the problem. They were just saying like, see for yourself, make up, and inviting the opportunity for critical thinking. But I do think, the education aspect is a huge part.
Yeah. I think so on to that, taking kind of slowly progressing kind of the conversation towards where that comes from. I think that has to do thing with what we call time preference.
Okay.
So this is a bigger topic,
yeah.
And for those, time preference can be used in any means. We can talk about it in terms of kind of work and income. We can talk about it in business, every kind of scenario. But the idea is, if you have a low time preference, you're willing to. My definition could be unclear here to some people, but the idea is you're willing to look at the longer term, right? So a lower time preference.
Pretty much delay gratification.
Absolutely, spot on. So delaying that gratification and looking more long term, bigger picture thinking. Whereas high time preference is kind of immediate satisfaction, immediate gratification, immediate, I need to feel good in everyday culture. It's kind of like the junk food side of things.
Right.
It's like, I need my junk food because it makes me feel good in the moment. It gets... my hunger is sorted. I feel good. I've got that sugary food in my body, and here we go again. I got that dopamine coming through. Yeah. So it comes through in many different aspects, and I feel that and this always sounds like I'm always being negative about society, but again, just being critical about certain aspects. There are a lot of things about society I love. Yeah. And I'll try to be more positive about them in future episodes. But in this area, this is something that I certainly think humans, we've evolved to have a higher time preference. We want that immediate satisfaction. Yeah. From things such as Tinder, we want that immediate dopamine when we swipe right. I believe it's all right, and we get a match.
Well played.
I've never had one.
Sure.
Yeah. So you get that immediate satisfaction, right? From things such as that. It's pornography. You get that immediate satisfaction in what we're earning, what we're doing. When we want that immediate pay rise, we don't want to wait out, or we don't want to put the work into business development. We want that immediate satisfaction. We want to buy things that we love, what makes us feel good now.
Yeah.
And look, I'm generalizing on the whole because there are many people in society that are thinking the other way. But I certainly think as a whole, we've been conditioned to think that is good for us.
Yeah.
So kind of linking it with the critical thinking, I think the idea that critical thinking takes work. It does take some effort from your side to look beyond the clickbait article. And that's what requires a lower time preference when you're doing that critical thinking.
It's I was wondering where you're going with that. Very smart point. I would also argue, alongside that, the willingness to be wrong also needs to be up there as well.
Okay.
And I say this because I've had like 3 or 4 hour conversations with my sister about like very mundane topics.
Yeah.
And my mum was like, why do you guys do that? And we're just like, I don't know, like, how do these conversations last and go on for so long? We're like, ultimately, I think we're just both willing to be wrong. If we're talking about something, then I'm willing to accept other people's point of view. But there is this, I don't know, I guess maybe a shame with being wrong. And I think this does tie into critical thinking. But there is this shame almost with being wrong. Michael Che, very good comedian, SNL writer, talks about this, where he makes a series of insensitive jokes, and he's like, look, I'm happy to learn from the experience. I just don't want to be attacked for it. He's like, if I say something that you disagree, and he has a very smart joke about this, but he's like, if I say something that you disagree with, don't shout at me. It's an opportunity for you to educate me and make me a better human. I invite you to do that. And that was just such a beautiful sentiment, how he said that. And he has a great joke about that, so I do recommend you watch. It's called Matters on Netflix.
Okay.
Very, very smart.
Yeah. So is that his own stand-up show?
Yeah, stand-up special. So he writes for SNL, but that's a stand-up show. And he just has, I would argue... And we're back. Had to cut because the camera overheated. We got a phone call in the meantime, and, well, we needed to wait for it to cool down.
Yeah.
Anyway. No idea what either one of us was talking about, but I think the core focus of this episode, very randomly... Not very randomly, we said we'd talk about it, but cancel culture, critical thinking, that's what I want the takeaway and the theme to be around. Just being nice to each other.
Yeah,
nice.
Definitely. But I think something I definitely want to touch on more in a future episode is kind of gratitude. And
that's what we should have talked about.
And gratitude, we talked about, we kind of went on to low time preference, high time preference, all of that.
That's
so it'll be a really nice takeaway next time. Because we've touched on in episodes with Ollie and Oliver and things like that of what gratitude means. So
I think we can do a whole episode on gratitude, and I think that's very linked to being a director. This episode was not.
Yeah.
Sometimes we take breaks. Sometimes we take a left turn rather than a right.
Definitely. We're just debriefing though.
We're just debriefing. This is you're just talking to us. Sam, she's just chatting to us. That's all this is. But one thing I definitely wanted to highlight is I don't want to be a hypocrite of what we said. If we have said anything in this episode, because we've touched on some pretty controversial topics, not massively, but we've touched on some controversial topics. What I did want to say is that please don't form a mob. Tell us if we've said something that might cause offense, because I don't know any, I know very much from your side, having known you for the past few years, that we'd be very much open to a conversation. Definitely don't like being attacked, Absolutely. You said this and you deserve to go to hell, but if you said this, I disagree, or you said this and that offended me, I would ask why. I would ask what happened there. I'd love to have that conversation. Definitely. If anything like that. We're
far too young to get cancelled, but then there's never an age to get cancelled, and I agree. It's spot on with what you said, that I think we're learning that it's okay to be wrong, or certainly, it's okay to...
I'm learning a few times a day.
Absolutely. So, no, we're more than happy to look into that more.
I think back to our regularly scheduled programming next week, we talk about gratitude. I definitely keep that in the bank, because I have a lot of things to say about it. I know you have. We've had long chats about this, and what a wonderful thing that can be.
Absolutely.
And what a core component of happiness it can be.
Amazing.
In the meanwhile, I think we've been talking for a while.
Yeah.
I'm happy to sign off here. Sorry if we cut off at a random point, but stuff happens.
But if you made it to that point in the episode, thank you very much for listening.
Honoured and flattered.
But also to everyone else who's been listening, thank you. Don't forget to comment, subscribe wherever you are. If there's no subscribe button where you're listening to this right now, just do whatever you can to give us some support, because we are getting going. And if you need anything else or want to hear more, just let us know.
Just watching.
Cheers.